Hi everybody, welcome to our webinar today, Designing from a Distance, Protecting Your Intellectual Property. We are so excited to see so many of you online today. We've again had an amazing response to this webinar. This is part of a series that we've been doing. If you missed the first one, we're going to come back and talk about a couple things that we hit on there, but I can't wait to really dive into some of the topics today. We could not do this event without a couple guest speakers. I'll introduce them in just a moment. Just so everyone knows, this particular webinar is going to be recorded, so if you want to come back and revisit anything or share it with your team, of course, you are welcome to share that recording with anybody. Now, looking ahead to, this is CEU approved, so for any of my NARI or NKBA designers, you guys do earn a credit for the session. Don't forget, if you are an NKBA designer, don't forget that all of your CEUs are due at the end of June, so you'll want to get this one in. Now, before I introduce our presenters, I would really like to know a little bit more about the group that's here with us today. So throughout, you're going to see a couple questions pop up, but here's the first one. Tell me, do you own your own business? Do you work for someone else? Or are you a student? Can you plug in your answer and submit that? We're going to see. Ooh, we have a lot of sole proprietors, a lot of business owners here, but definitely more people that work for someone else. Looks good. Oh, a couple good comments in the chat. Yeah. You own your own business, Jamie. That's awesome. Good. And I just think that kind of helps us as we talk to a few different scenarios. Some things might be things that you're like, oh yeah, this is a piece of cake. This is part of being a business owner. This is something I had to set up years ago. And then there might be things that you go, oh gosh, I never really thought about it that way because I've never had to go this in depth. Now when we talk about intellectual property, the whole reason for today's webinar was based on questions we got in the last webinar. People were asking, hey, we're doing a lot more online meetings. We're doing a lot more in a virtual sense, but how do I protect my intellectual property as a designer? So that's kind of the background on where we got going or where we got started with today's presentation. But before we get into the good stuff, let me introduce a couple of great guys. First up is Michael Cashner of Cashner Designs. Michael is out of the Philadelphia area, and if you haven't met him, chances are if you've been to the Kitchen and Bath show or gone to an NKBA event, or if you're a certified living in place designer, you might have come across Michael. Let me tell you a funny thing. I actually met Michael because of social media. So he is a longtime 2020 design user. However, he had actually posted and shared a couple of things and tagged hashtag 2020 and it caught my eye, and I reached out to him, and we've been friends ever since. So as you can see, he is a lifetime student to this trade, and I've always gotten a lot out of the conversations I've had with him from a design perspective, but he also gets the behind the scenes and is a great, great salesperson. So we got to spend some time together last year because he is also part of the 2020 Design Advisory Council. Now, in addition to that, we also have Tom Shea, who's also part of our Design Advisory Council. And when I mentioned that Advisory Council, that's a group that we selected to kind of give us feedback of what's going on out there, what's happening in your business out in the world. And if you met Tom, Tom started as a designer, but now he works a little bit more in the manufacturing side of things. So you'll be able to hear a little bit more about his background in a little bit. But if you have any questions about really perfecting your sales process, Tom is definitely a go-to. He's helped us as a beta tester on many different versions and testing out the cloud. And he also, many of you probably met him at our VIP event that happened at the Kitchen and Bath show back in January, which feels like a million years ago already, right? Pretty wild. All right, so you're going to get to hear from both of them in just a minute. Now again, remember we're talking about intellectual property today, and I'm going to ask the guys some very specific questions, but before I really dive into that first question, I'm going to go back to a little bit of the general background of kitchen and bath process and the day-to-day things we do every day. I probably don't need to tell you anything on this slide that you see on the screen, but if I asked you which one of these areas is your business the most vulnerable when it comes to intellectual property, could you pinpoint the area that could be the most challenging. Now, intellectual property, a couple different things. We're going to talk about one side of the fence that is geared toward working with clients and kind of what their expectations are and what a client may or may not do with your property. And we're also going to talk about working with other design professionals. So depending on which way you look at it, you might look at things like your conceptual design process, some of the beginning steps of that design process, like selecting materials or doing those first presentations, as the areas that might be the most subject to this challenge with intellectual property and making sure that we're getting everybody on the same page. And then a little bit later in the process, when you think of working drawings, your floor plans, all the details, your final presentations, again, we want that to be respected and we want that to be shown as ours. So we're going to dive into some of those examples in just a little bit. So my first question to the guys. So as a designer, you're kind of looking at this with your design hat on. What does intellectual property, what does that term mean? I'm going to start with Tom. What does it mean to you?
What intellectual property means to me, Vanessa, is anything that I create for design or for a project is I consider to be mine. So drawings, pictures, any information that I provide from an expertise standpoint is what intellectual property means to me. If it came from my brain, it belongs to me.
Awesome. No, very, very simple, easy explanation. I love it. And Michael, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you have the same idea? What does intellectual property mean to you?
Yes, I do agree with Tom, and I think that for those of us who have cranked out design work and manifested things from inspiration and then put them on paper and then they became some person's reality in their home, they actually understand wholeheartedly the angst that goes through that process. That we have to put all the energy into it. So it can be symbols, it can be artistic works, it could be a wall mural, it could be some kind of setup you do for a wet bar. So things that really are going to uphold your standard of design capability and your brand, that to me is my intellectual property. It has my stamp on it, and it's something that basically when you look at it, you would think, yes, that's in line with Cashner Designs and what Michael does for a living.
Yes, you and your brand. That makes total sense, and I think you're right. We as designers talk about our design and the things we're creating, but it trickles into so many areas when you think of art and you think of anything that we create, or maybe we collaborate in a creation of something. So good. I just wanted to make sure everybody was kind of on the same page, like exactly what does this mean? It sounds like a really fancy word for something that could turn into a legal challenge. So that's awesome. Now, before we kind of take a look at a couple more steps or a couple more things, I've got one more question for everybody. Now, the question just popped up on the screen because we're going to start talking about working with our own customers and how to set their expectations with intellectual property. Can you tell me, on average, the consumer in North America, how often in their lifetime do they remodel a kitchen? Do you guys have an idea? Oh, we have some smart designers in this group. A lot of you are answering the first one to 2 times in their life. Now this number might vary a little bit. If you hop across the pond in Europe, I feel like they are a little different. They're working in a lot more existing spaces, and their spaces are moving at maybe a little different pace than here. But I ask this question because we maybe make a lot of assumptions too as a designer that has been doing it for years. We might expect that a consumer understands the whole process or understands each step, right? So setting those expectations right away of what we're going to give our anybody as far as design, what can they do with it? Where can they take it? Can they reuse that information somehow? Of course, some of you are going to say, no way, but then there might be some areas that are kind of gray, right? So the next thing we want to talk about is, how do you really protect your designs? If you, step back and you think, again, setting the expectation with the client, maybe you're at the beginning of that design process, and you want to work with them on this project. What do you do with them? How do you set that expectation to protect your design for yourself? yourself. Michael, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. I think it's important to really just discuss and talk about the big elephant in the room, and the thing that most of us have danced around for most of our careers while working for other businesses, who basically had to say as far as how we treated, walk-in clients, people that from our gut instinct as designers and salespeople for decades knew that this person really had no intentions of purchasing from you, or they're just shopping, and we had to give out everything, to advance to where I presently am, where I qualify all leads, even if they're coming from someone I know, and have created a process so that I don't have a fear of someone having information and taking it and going somewhere, because I have a process in place to where I'm getting compensated for my time, whether it's discussing the design, coming up with the design, collaborating with my clients, shopping for products, so on and so forth. So that really has to begin at the discovery phone call, and then the following email that I send out to my clients for the survey that explicitly states, thank you, I appreciate you wanting to work with me and Cashner Designs. This is my fee structure. This is my process. This is what you can expect in working with me. And by taking a transparent approach, which is scary as hell for most people who have never done this, and you have to start somewhere, and I know Tom will agree with me on this, is that there's no time to start except for now, and no excuses. It's like a Band-Aid, right? So if you have the opportunity to state your case and to explain why you're the person for the job and what you can bring to the table without getting so involved that you later could resent someone for not having charged them for work that they subsequently took and went to a competitor, have that process in place, you eliminate the variable, and you can just take a deep breath and release a sigh and say, we're going on our merry way. We both know what each other's holding in their hands at the poker table, and there's not really going to be a surprise if you set it up properly from the beginning.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think when you mention it's scary, I can definitely relate to that. When I was first doing design work, primarily bath design, I think there was a lot of assumption that designers are taught how to sell. And the first question if somebody would have asked me when I first started, like, are you a salesperson? I would have said, no way. When we present it that way, it sounds super scary. I want you to buy my idea, but if I don't outline that really clearly, like you said, discovery call, so you're telling them, and then you're following up with them with kind of a written contract of sorts, hopefully they know exactly what to expect. Love it.
I think that it's important that you're not afraid to share information with the client, but you also have to have that kind of set boundary of when enough is enough before you have a commitment. And that will eliminate your fear, and you'll have that understanding mutually with your prospective client.
I would agree with you 100%. You were right when you said that, Michael. I started in this business selling online, and that was back in 06, 07, and I learned very quickly that I had to protect my value, which was my designs. And one of the most important things that I learned was that setting the expectations with the clients was going to get me the best business, to be honest with you. When you find people that understand how you work and can work with you within your parameters, as opposed to you doing the things that they want to do, which if anybody's ever heard me do any sales training, I always talk about control. I mean, that's part of the control of the sale, in my opinion, is doing things the way that you need to do business to be successful, and having the client fall in line with that, and having that in writing, having it written in a written agreement, and then obviously when you get through that stuff and you've had some people take your designs and go do business somewhere else, what you eventually get to is a design deposit kind of situation where you end up not allowing anybody to have anything of yours without a design deposit. That's where I got to after a couple years of learning that people were taking my stuff and going elsewhere, I started to require design deposits once they agreed that they could work with Tom Shea in the way that Tom Shea did business.
Yeah, there is a ton of people in the chat window right now saying yes, 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 like they totally agree with the idea. But then there's a couple questions too on the side of, okay, like how do you get started with that? Do you do a flat fee? Do you have an hourly design fee? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like what's worked in your business?
I was just going to say, I see Tom on here was asking, about taking a design deposit. I agree with that statement that he made that, the easy way to sell that is you give me a design deposit. At the end of the day, if you decide to go somewhere else, I'll give you all the designs. And if you decide to buy from me, I'll just take it off the price of the cabinetry, is the way that I did it. And it seems like there's a bunch of people out there that have done it that way in the past.
Yeah, I just read something from Susie Walker, hi Susie, about doing free estimates, and it seems to work because you get the sale. And this is where I disagree, because I did that for 14 years of my life. It's great when you're collecting checks and you're signing the contracts with the people and everything's good. And when that incident rate of closing starts to drop, then the mindset starts to become a little more defensive, and you can't help but be that way as a person. The other side of the coin that I can now look at working for myself, having my own company, is all the money that I left on the table back then. So imagine all the profit that you're making now closing sales, and even if it was 2%, 5% per sale, whatever it was, $500, that you have collected from each person as far as understanding, hey, listen, we're the best in our area and this is why. And this is what you get and this is what we give to you. That's on each individual salesperson, each individual designer to speak up for themselves. Because if you haven't learned by now, here's the wake-up call. No one's going to do it for you. So you get what you ask for. You don't ask for the sale. Unless it's somebody desperate, you're probably not going to get it. Okay? So being demonstrative with how you can help people, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. But if your terms are, hey, listen, for a lot of us independent people, we're not getting paid by someone to do designs, okay? As an employee, I did, and it wasn't that much of an issue when money was left on the table. I didn't get the sale. Of course, the bosses didn't like it, but I knew that there was someone else coming into the door to fill those shoes. Just to consider, if you look back historically at money you could have made, a certain percentage per sale, and see if it's worth it for you. Each person's going to have an individual scenario and outlook on this process, but for me, it has actually helped me close sales. It has helped me have fruitful, truthful relationships with clients that will now refer me new clients because of how I took care of them. This is all transparent, and it has to begin at the beginning. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, no, it's great. And again, like the chat messages are coming in like 100 miles an hour right now because a lot of people are saying, yes, this is exactly what I've experienced or similar. Now, the interesting thing is like every single one of us could kind of put our idea on the table and they would all be different because we're all in different cities and different regions, scales of projects, and all different things. So some of you have been asking very specific, like, how much do I charge or what is that percentage? And it's going to vary for everybody. But kind of going back to setting the expectation, we need to let our client know exactly what that is, because if they are shopping 3 different competitors, which in an online world it's hard to imagine who has the time for that. But that's a whole other rabbit hole. We could look at this, and again, we just want to make sure that the client knows exactly what our process is, make them feel comfortable, and trust us to be able to step. So I'm going to segue a little bit to make sure we have enough time to talk about everything. We could have had a discussion just on one question, I think, for this whole webinar. It's awesome. When we talk about setting those expectations in a written form, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about photography and watermarks and all bit, but I just wanted to show an example that Michael had shared with me. This is an example of his photo release form. So right in the very beginning of your process, Michael, you say you have this as part of something. You set the client's expectation so they know you'd like to use some of that professional photography when the project's done, correct?
Correct. It also, it eases, there are a lot of people out there, clients that all of us have worked with that are very private. They don't want their image anywhere. They don't want people to know where they live. They don't want people that they know to know what their house looks like, or maybe the lovely pieces of artwork and how can they afford that. So you escape judgment by staying private. I like to make everything, again, keeping in my transparent sales model and my statement of work. I provide this photo release, not at the end, at the very beginning. Hey, listen, I'm really excited about your project. I think it's going to be one that I may submit for an award with one of my associations. In order to be able to get to that point, I employ this photo release form. This is how it protects you. This is how it protects me, and I'll respect your privacy. And everything right there is pretty basic.
Right. So outlining that early on, I think, is something that some of us might not consider, because you think of this as like, oh, we're going to take the photos at the end of the project. So just this is one small example of all the things of setting those expectations right away. Now, I'm going to segue a little bit more and talk more about that presentation. We're beginning of the design process. We're maybe doing some conceptual designs or even the final presentation. And one of the questions that has been asked more and more on some of the social media, like there's different Facebook groups. We got this question in our last webinar, was if you're utilizing some of your images or if you're doing 360 panoramas, how do you control that? Because if you're giving an image to your consumer or this person who is potentially going to invest in your process, whether they've given you money or not, at what point could they walk away? And I want to show something real quick. Of course, I'm going to add some tech geek portion to this segment. So I'm going to share my screen, and there's a few different apps that actually do this next thing I'm going to show. There's one called RoundMe. A lot of you have probably heard of Matterport. I'm actually going to show something called SeekBeak. It sounds hilarious, but I just want to show this real quick. Imagine today in 2020 Design or 2020 Fusion, you might be creating a 360 panoramic view, right? Something that we can kind of move around and show the client a view that is not just one static perspective view. We can look around the whole space. What this website allows you to do is actually take that file. So when you receive the dealer email that has the JPEG file of the image, you can upload it to this site, and it gives you a couple things. One, you can control it. When you upload this, you choose who you're going to share it with and how you're going to share it. Are you going to send somebody the link? Are you going to put it on your social? Are you going to put it on your website? Who gets to see this? Two, if you are giving this to a client and they don't go with your services, you can take it down. Where today, if it's just up on our server, you don't get to control that in this moment. But if I put it on a website like this, think of it as like someplace I can host it. Okay. Now, SeekBeak.com. It has a free option to get started, so I'm not here to sell anything, but of course there's all sorts of packages that also include reports and forms and different ways that you can engage people. But the other really cool thing, it also gives me the ability to link multiple panos, and if I step in here, I've got some different controls to edit this. Let me show you how easy this is. When I click on Edit, I can add either jump hotspot, so I can jump from the kitchen to the bathroom, or I can add a point hotspot, which allows me to add more detail to this. In the case that I maybe on this example want to link this to a site where maybe I'm doing e-design and I want people to shop for this. Notice I have the range or the hob or the faucet or the tap. If I click on this, this is actually a link. Let me go out to the live view. If I click on it, as a consumer, it takes me out to this Amazon page. Now I know this does not fit every person's business model that's in this webinar. However, did you know that there's all sorts of ways to create different ways to have your business be able to purchase things through different websites and get paid for that? Amazon could just be one of them, right? So that's just a small example. Now if I step back over here, what if you think about some of the just design concepts, or some of the basic questions, like I have a lot of people ask me, okay, at what point or what services do you offer if somebody asks you to do a basic consultation for art or paint colors, do you do that? Well, everybody's different. Some of you are going to say, absolutely, I do whole home design, or I do, just simple, one basic appointment. Let's do that. We can do a quick Zoom call and walk through some things. But what if I could take them and give them kind of a collection of art pieces to choose from, work with the things that they have. So this is just, again, just popping out to a website, but was able to link to something specific. Now when it gets really fun, if you're not looking to jump it to a website or somewhere else that's not yours, you can also embed your own web. You can add details. You're going to see this copyright in this written example in a minute again. But this is an example. Justine Marie, she was in our last webinar, but I just leveraged one of her panoramic examples. So I wanted to give her credit and put her information in here so it's kind of embedded and tagged. So just another concept, another way to think of it, it's not just giving them a file and hoping that they don't go shop me. I want to be able to control it a little bit. Again, if you leverage this website, you'll get analytics. You'll be able to see exactly how many views it's had, if they've used it before, you cancel out of that, and there's all sorts of things. Last little detail, if I step back, I have to save that. I can click on this map and I can even link a floor plan, and there's little points that I could pick. So if you have large projects, if you're doing multi-unit family homes, if you've got a whole neighborhood, we could really, really amplify the offering through something like this. So this is just uploading a pano in a different way and sharing it. Maybe you embed it to your website. A lot of potential there, right? So just a little different. Want to kind of bend your mind a little bit there. Okay, we're going to jump back and for real this time. Go back to our next poll. You guys already answered it though. You're awesome. So segueing a little bit, I've already teased you a smidge on, okay, what are you using today? Watermarks, trademarks, copyrights, patents. Those to me, as someone who has not owned a business, I always have to go back and kind of look up some of those terms, right? Many of you are totally perfect when it comes to watermarks and copyrights, and that's exactly what I was expecting. That's good to hear. A lot of you are leveraging those, but we're going to talk more about really what that means or what those do. So here's the tough question for the guys. Tom, I'm going to start with you, but what do you think? Are you flattered or are you offended if another designer were to share your work?
I'm flattered as long as they give you credit for it. From a manufacturer's perspective, we have all the images that a dealer could need to use as advertising or those kinds of things that are obviously copyright protected. But when it's your stuff, when another designer shares it, it inspires me. It boosts our industry. It can also build your credibility as you associate with other skilled designers, especially if you're giving somebody credit. When you're putting stuff out there, I get inspired by other designers. My wife's an artist. She gets inspired by other people, and she says, and so do I, who they got that inspiration from and gives them credit. It takes just that one person that steals your ideas to kind of ruin it for everybody. So I would encourage everybody to be better than that. And if you ever question the professionalism of somebody that you're doing business with, go look them up on LinkedIn. Make sure that they're a good quality person, or at least look like it on the surface if you have questions about them. That's where I go when I go to look up people or other things, businesses. But yeah, I think it's a definite, kudos to you when somebody uses your stuff, but they have to give you credit for it in order for it to mean anything, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. But now you work for a manufacturer today, so what kind of resources are out there? I know it's going to be different for every manufacturer. If I was one of your dealers and I didn't have, or maybe I'm just getting started, where would you point me for sharing images or reusing content that maybe you have as a manufacturer?
Typically, all the manufacturers, most of the larger ones, all have marketing departments that have all of those images stored. Some of them have layouts, multiple things to help people run their business. If you're not working with a manufacturer that has those things, I would suggest that you start, because there's a lot of us out there in the industry that have spent a lot of time and effort, making sure that we have all those things to support our partners in the retail space.
Awesome. Good, 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 good. All right. Now, Michael, flagged or offended, what would happen if I were to share your work and I don't give you credit? Tell me the truth.
Well, I would be flattered. You know that. I think that sharing is caring, but, and that's a huge but, every single person who uses Instagram that is on this webinar pretty much on the daily is scrolling through the feed, and then they see somebody posting something, and what happens? You're like, no way. That's not them. And I know for a fact some people who have utilized other people's images and projected it as their brand because that's what they were building up to. Well, kudos to the people who succeeded. I think that ultimately things catch up, right? So if you're plagiarizing, if you're trying to build your brand around other people's images, it's very misleading. And the only thing I can suggest is, as a professional who I mostly post my own stuff, I have in the past posted some other inspiration things when they're related to a project, you have to give credit right at the beginning of the post, saying, by the way, this is an inspo. I see a lot of people doing it different ways. But if you're burying somebody's name at the bottom or in a tag and not really saying in your post, this is not my work, this is the work of this, but I'm using it for my project in Philadelphia, so on and so forth, then I just say shame on you. And in reality, the post should be removed. Unfortunately, as we're all learning now, it's like finding a needle in a haystack to get things actually taken care of when somebody uses your images on a social media website. So the one thing I can say is, you know when you're doing something wrong. If you have a question or a doubt about it, the best thing to do, try to connect with that person and ask them, do you mind if I use this image because it's really helping me on, with my current project that I'm working on. There's certain elements of your design that I like. I want to share that with my audience. Because unfortunately, when you're getting started, it's hard to show pictures of things that you haven't yet done. We all have a lot of ideas. And if we can't show our prospective audience, then how are we ever going to build our brand? So it's better to ask ahead of time and get that permission. That's what I say.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of hinted toward the whole karma thing. And I think a lot of us, when we see things, we might immediately assume like, oh, they stole that, or they took that, or they're reusing it. Did they intend to not give us the credit? Who knows? Because it's just so easy to share in today's world. But I know.
I think the kicker is when they. I'm sorry, I was going to say I think the kicker is when people compliment them and they turn around and say thank you. Thanks, I appreciate it. Great job, great work. Oh, that's great, I appreciate it. So that's kind of writing out everything for your history.
Right, exactly. And we sometimes have to look back and laugh at it. Of course, the meme on the screen, oh, gotta love it, Abraham Lincoln. And he probably would have the best Instagram account we could imagine. Example. Here's a beautiful, finished, complete project, something that you might share or show as an example. But as you can see in that bottom right-hand corner, the gorgeous watermark, with the name and the logo and everything that's clean and clear. Now, I've seen a lot of conversation, again, in the Facebook groups and out in some of these different associations saying, well, you can watermark or you can tag or you can do everything you want, but people can still, edit a photo or do things with it. Yes, but we're going to try to do our best to still show, what's ours and what's easy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that watermark in a second. On floor plans and drawings, you might consider including a copyright. And a lot of you already talked about a copyright, but also making some really clear statements of what this design is intended for. This example that you see on the screen are two simple sentences that it's actually recommended by the National Kitchen and Bath Association. They have this in their professional resource library or their knowledge center online, where it just says, this plan is really intended for a client, and but it remains the property of our firm. You can't just willy-nilly go reuse it. And at least we've got kind of something. I've seen this rewritten in many different ways. Of course, you can put your flavor to it, but hopefully that'll help kind of set the tone or set the scene, right? Now, I'm going to demo 2 more things right now. And one, I think some of you have probably already done this a million times, so I'll go through it quickly. But the other one, I'm going to kind of push it a little beyond maybe what you may have seen. So let me share and jump over. Of course, the first one is watermarking, and if any of you have ever been in any of my presentations, you know I'm going to use Canva. Canva is just a really easy tool. Of course, InDesign or Photoshop, or pick your favorite editor, and there's also a lot of websites that can create some quick like batch logo or batch watermarks on an image. But if you don't have a tool, it's fine. Just jump over to canva.com, upload an image. I can go grab a quick image right here. I think I've got one that, oh, there it is. This is what I was thinking of. This is an example. You've probably seen it on our 2020 social media recently. This was designed by Brittany Hutt, one of our Inspiration Design Award winners. So when I bring an image in, it literally takes just a couple moments to either bring in my logo, which I already have it saved in here, so I can just bring this in and resize it, put it where I want, or I could decide to come in and just do some simple text or a copyright, right? So if I go over to the text area, maybe I grab one of these that's already got kind of some cool fonts, and I'll just quick type in Brittany Hutt. Oops, let's see if I can actually spell this correctly, and give her the credit. Maybe put a little copyright in there, change the color, adjust where you want it, and then I could quickly take this and save this design. And it's not letting me grab it and move it where I want to, but there we go. Okay, so I would continue to edit this, but how simple, fast, quick. If I'm going to post it to social, maybe you've got at least one little thing to be able to keep that credit to yourself, rather than if it gets shared, maybe they'll tag you, maybe they won't. Who knows? Who knows? Now when it comes to sharing, let's have a little fun here. I'm going to go out to Google, and if you were to simply look up something, or if you're ever questioning, like, has anything from my portfolio, maybe from my website, ever been out on the internet that I didn't share? What if we go and we search something like kitchen color trends 2020? Okay, I'm going to show you 2 things here. First, we're going to jump over to images, and we're just going to kind of pick something fun. This guy here. All right, so literally just Googled it. I don't have this photo saved anywhere, nothing fancy. It's just kind of hanging over here on the right. I could go to the web page, of course, but did you know that you can just simply right-click and literally just search Google for image? And it will do like a cross-reference across multiple websites to see if it can find that exact image. So if I scroll down a bit, you'll see that this has been on the cutlerkitchenandbath.com, HGTV Canada, Spark and Sparrow Interiors. So this potentially could be an image that was approved to be shared, but at quick glance, I don't know that, right? So for your own work, you might kind of reverse image search it, if you would. If it's already online, you can right-click and search it. If it's not, of course, you can just go to Google, and in that upper right-hand corner, there's also images here, and you can upload images as well, and it'll search for those things. Now, where it gets really interesting, let's see if I can share my screen here. I'm going to quick share another device on the screen. It's going to come over in just a second. Now, this is actually my cell phone. And I'm only doing this on my cell phone because on mobile devices you have a few other features. Okay, so you're going to be able to see my screen in just a second. And maybe if it's going to play nice. Oh, and it just went away. Let me try to bring that up one more time. Okay, here it's thinking again. Okay, now it's much happier. So you should be able to see just like my phone screen for just a moment, and you can see that I have Chrome, or Google Chrome, and then the literal Google app installed. And here's what's interesting about this Google app is I can come in and I could search for a specific image. Let me go back and actually search for that same thing that I just did a second ago, right? So Kitchen Color Trends 2020. I'm going to come down a little bit and look for that specific image. That's the one that we just saw, right? Now I'm going to try to make this a little bigger because I know it's real small on the screen. There we go. Okay. So I could do that same thing. I can tap the screen and I can tell it to search for Google Images. However, when you're on a mobile device, look in kind of this upper right-hand corner, and there's a little tiny icon that kind of looks like sort of like a QR code, but it's just like a little box with a circle in it, and it has a number next to it. If I tap on this, this uses something called the Google Lens. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the tables a little bit. We started with the conversation of intellectual property and preserving our things, but could we use some of this to our advantage if we're helping clients source something or try to find, like, oh my gosh, where did they get that lamp or that bar stool or whatever it is? What this does is it puts these little hot spots on certain things like the cabinetry. It'll take me to like other things that are similar colors. But when it finds a product that's for sale, I can very quickly find things that look similar or possibly that item. Okay, so this actually found the bar stool, the lights, different things. So one of the biggest reasons I show this is in our clients' hands. Like maybe we use this as a tool to find something, but our clients can do this too. Is that good? Is that bad? There could be both sides of that story, but it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. Now, in addition to that, what if I come back out and I go over to Google again? This time I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to tap on the Google Lens. And now you're looking at my screen. I'm going to stand up for a second and I'm going to look at my office chair. Okay, so you're staring at my chair. And when I look at this chair, a dot pops up. And when I tap on it, same thing. I can immediately shop for it. So imagine, not that I'm going to many stores or being inspired by many showrooms at the moment, but when that day comes back, I can very quick, just by looking at it through Google, it can tell me all about that thing. It is just wild. So again, you could do this. Your homeowners could be looking at things like this. There's lots of different ways to think about that. Okay, kind of fun. Let's step back over into the presentation. I have another question. You guys know I love to find out more about you. So tell me, how long have you been in the kitchen and bath or design business? Give us feedback. I love listening to Luann Nagara. She has that podcast called A Well-Designed Business, and I always crack up because she refers to the baby design. Or if you could kind of look back and think about some of the things that you've learned in your career, where do you sit? Oh gosh, you guys, there is so much knowledge in this group. For the majority of us have 11 to 20 years or 20 plus years of experience. Like, where has the time gone? That's amazing. Okay, now I ask that because of
this is cool to see.
And a segue to. Isn't that wild? If we could step back in time and try to think of like what could we have done better? I'm sure you guys have tons of stories. If you could give yourself advice 15 years ago, what kind of things would that look like? Michael, tell me a little bit about like what have you learned in the last 15 years?
Skepticism is gold. It's always good to listen to your gut. It's a gift I've had my entire life, and contrary to popular belief, I haven't always followed it. And when things have happened, especially since going on my own, I learned a lot in my previous position too, because most of the clients I sold to were contractors, and questionable about who was installing what, and the whole process was very convoluted. No forms signed. Usually designs weren't signed. There was no pre-construction walkthrough or meeting or qualifying how hardware was supposed to be installed. Flash forward to today, I just sent out for a new job I just landed, 30-something pages, the presentation you saw, Vanessa, that I did on Canva with all the manufacturer's information in light of COVID-19 concerns and not being face-to-face with my clients. But being transparent is not only about how you communicate verbally to people, it's about your process and putting things on paper, having the client read through, agree to, through signature, through initial, through dating, so that you have that historical reference later, God forbid, somebody says, I didn't know that, or this isn't what I thought it was. And if that continues to happen to you on your quest to becoming the best designer in your area or in your lifetime, I just caution you to go back every once in a while when you have a moment, like right now, hint, hint, reevaluate your process and see where people either took advantage of you, exposed your weaknesses or weak points, and really hone in under a microscope and say, how can I not let that happen to me again? I'll tell you from personal experience, when you got to dish out thousands of dollars of your own money because of something that was an oversight, it's very painful. Hundreds of dollars are painful, let's be honest. So how do we resurrect our business practices over time continually? As time goes on, you should get more and more bulletproof. I don't know anyone that's 100% bulletproof. If they are, that's good for them. But I will say this, whenever someone does expose that weak link in my sales process or in my delivery process or implementation of my designs, I secretly thank them to myself, even though I'm grinding my teeth, because that just made me that much better. So the younger Michael 15 years ago, which was right in the onset pretty much of me becoming a kitchen designer, I didn't know what I was doing. There's a wealth of knowledge that we all learned in the trenches, getting to those of us that showed up with over 10 years of experience that we've learned in the field. And that insight is irreplaceable and invaluable. So I would just say, look out, dot your I's, cross your T's, have everything in writing. Good luck.
No, go ahead, Tom. What would you tell yourself 15 years ago?
I would have told myself 15 years ago, once again, have a process. I mean, I came from an industry that, once you sold something, it was gone. You never saw it again. It was a very short sales cycle. It wasn't anything like our business that we're in that can be sometimes years of a sales cycle. But having that process and making sure I went through every step, I later learned was my key to success. Once I got to that point, and I realized that the reason I was losing things is because I wasn't going through the steps properly. Any good salesperson that understands that there is a sales process and follows that sales process, it's also the same when you're designing a kitchen, right? You design it typically the same way from beginning to end. And as well as what Michael said, we get better because of our bad clients, in my opinion. They're our teachers. They're the ones that later on down the line, when you're talking to Mr. and Mrs. Jones and they say something and that you've heard before, you might look at them and say, I don't think we're going to be a good fit. And that's okay, because you realize that, that was the exact same thing that somebody else did to you 6-8 months ago, 6-10 years ago. But once you learn that lesson from those clients that have proved difficult, and hopefully you don't have a lot of those, but you really got to learn from them when you do. And yes, process and following it and being consistent and doing the same thing every time. The best thing I learned in sales is if you do the same thing over and over again, you get the same result, which is a desired result, which is a sale.
Yeah, so true. So true. And I think I'm sure everybody is nodding their head with everything you just said, Tom, because both of you guys gave just great examples there. Of course, we're all going to look back and go, oh, could we have done that better? I saw a comment in the chat about shadowing their installers more. They wish they would have hung out with the installers, and I would definitely second that concept. Just as much as
that's golden.
Of things. Yeah, that would just communicating with them or communicating with someone else that maybe even if it's not your forte, what a great advantage you could have if you had that knowledge. Oh, you guys, this has been amazing. I saw a couple more questions in the chat window. Yes. This presentation has been recorded, so you'll get a copy of this. I do want to mention too that we have a whole blog article on this concept, and we hit on things like the reverse Google image search and you have at your fingertips. Whether you're using it or not, you can refer to our blog to learn more. If anyone has any specific questions, obviously we didn't get heavy into how-tos or what to click on in the software to make it do different things. But if you have any specific training questions, we've got some great promotions going on right now. You can jump out to our training page. And you've probably seen we've been doing Facebook Lives. If you haven't, just jump over to Facebook and look for 2020 Spaces. We've been doing live sessions on our 2020 design tools, our 2020 Fusion tools, and even our Office tools, because everybody's working a little bit differently today, so we wanted to try to help out every way we can. So you guys, I really, really, really appreciate your time. Tom and Michael, as always, it has been amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you for spending time with us today. But we're out of time. We wrapped up a very quick hour. Thanks everybody for joining. Yeah, if you have anything in the future, find us at 2020spaces.com, or you can grab us on social. Just hashtag us at 2020spaces. Thanks everybody.